the political, economic, as well as the sports field. I'm Taghreed Hussein, having all the pleasure to be joined by my colleague Niveen Ramzi, and both will be updating you on the different segments on this panorama on the political, economic, and the sports field. Good day to you, Niveen.
Good day to you, Taghreed. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and we will start off with the main political headlines. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi addresses the International Climate Summit in New York. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi holds meetings with world leaders and senior officials on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly session. And the United States says wants to give diplomacy a chance in dealing with Iran.
Welcome back. The news in full. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi delivers on Monday Egypt's speech to the International Climate Summit, which convenes at the United Nations headquarters in New York as part of the 74th session of the UN General Assembly. In his speech, the president is expected to review the stance of Egypt, Africa, and the developing countries on climate change as one of the major threats affecting the world and Africa in particular. It is worth mentioning that while Africa has a limited share in the world's gas emissions causing the greenhouse effect, it is one of the main areas in the world affected by the phenomenon.
A new UN report published said the world is falling badly behind in the race of avert climate disaster because of runaway warming, with the 5-year period ending 2019 set to be the hottest ever. It comes ahead of a major UN climate summit Monday that will be attended by more than 60 world leaders as Secretary General Antonio Guterres pushes for countries to increase their greenhouse gas reduction targets. Details. Some 60 world leaders convene on Monday for a UN summit on climate emergency aimed at reinvigorating the faltering Paris Agreement at a time when mankind is releasing more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere than at any time in history. From heat waves to slow-crawling hurricanes to rapidly acidifying oceans, the impact of global warming are being felt more than ever before, yet the gap between carbon reduction targets demanded by scientists to avert catastrophe and actions thus far taken is only widening. It's within this context that a new youth-led movement has emerged and re-energized climate activism, symbolized by a Swedish teen who will take the podium in the morning following a speech by Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Fewer than half the 136 heads of government or state in New York this week to attend the UN General Assembly will present Monday. Among the list of those absent will be US President Donald Trump, who pulled his country out of the Paris Accord upon taking power and has made slashing environmental regulations a key part of his platform. Likewise, President Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil, under whose leadership the Amazon rainforest is continuing to burn at record rates, and Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, whose government has pursued an aggressively pro-coal agenda. China, the world's biggest carbon emitter by far, but also a leader in the renewable sector, will be present and represented by Foreign Minister Wang Yi. Guterres has asked countries to bring concrete, realistic plans to enhance commitment made in 2015 in Paris toward the goal of limiting long-term warming to less than 2 degrees Celsius and ideally 1.5 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial levels. 75 countries are expected to bring enhanced commitments, but officials have also been careful to manage expectations and say Monday's summit is also a run-up event to the 2020 UN Climate Summit that the UK will host in Glasgow.
And for more on the President's participation in the International Climate Summit, We're joined over the phone by Professor Dr. Ahmed Adli, who is an expert at the Ministry of State for Environmental Affairs. Professor Adli, well, the President is expected to address the Climate Summit, a very important gathering, and His Excellency will definitely also talk about climate change, not only in Egypt and how is it a challenge, but also in Africa, as His Excellency chairs the African Union. So that important program, developmental programs in that sphere, and the significance of the President's speech before this important gathering. Professor.
Yes, as you said, rightly said, the presentation or the speech by His Excellency, the President, is very important, being not only speaking on behalf of Egypt, but also on behalf of the African Union. Especially that the climate change issue and the risks of the climate change is affecting more the Africa region and especially the poorest countries in the Africa region. And it's already mentioned by the Secretary General of the United Nations that the world is not on the right track for to deal with the climate change. Basically because the rich countries, the developed countries, those who are responsible for the occurrence of the climate change and the global warming, they are not really putting what they have to do to deal with the situation. We have been very successful on the issue of mitigation, on the mitigation of the climate change and the greenhouse effect, greenhouse gases, I'm sorry. But unfortunately, we were not successful on the issues related to adaptation. And unfortunately, the countries that are going to be affected by the climate change are mainly the poor countries, and in Africa, the risks and the impact will be really beyond the capacity of these countries. And of course, this needs two things to be provided, technology and financial support. So the address or having the President addressing the General Assembly, speaking on behalf of Africa and on behalf of Egypt, this will make his presentation very important. And also, he has to find in his bilateral meetings and with the international organizations some feedback from the countries, especially the rich countries, developed countries. We are talking about USA, we are talking about European Union, we are talking about Japan, we are talking about China, all those who are responsible for the emission of the greenhouse gases, and also they have the capacity to provide the technology and the financial support. In addition to the international organizations that they have to work closely with governments and with the stakeholders in Africa and in Egypt to deal with the climate change risks and hazards.
Yes, definitely. Egypt is also exerting great efforts in that respect, leading efforts of climate change adaptation, a matter which is really essential now to deal with the issue of climate change. So if we talk about Egypt's efforts in that respect, and what kind of adaptation measures, in your opinion, are needed?
As you know, the climate, and also I'm talking to our audience, the climate change risks in Egypt could affect two main things, especially when it comes to food security and water security. Because of the drought that could happen due to the climate change, and also the risk of the flooding that could happen due to the sea level rise, which could affect the delta, and of course it is the main source of food security for the country. Plus, of course, affecting all the infrastructure that are already on the north coast. The issue also of the Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia is one of the issues that could also, in addition to the risk of having a dam on the main source of the Nile, if the climate change could also deal to minimize the amount of water coming from the Blue Nile. So together, the food security and water security are the most important elements and risks of the climate change. And to adapt to this means, many steps to be taken in the field of basically the agriculture and in the water management in the country. Already we have put some steps toward the adaptation measures for the protection of the North Coast, and also to deal with the risks and the hazards of drought and flooding. But it is not enough, and the government cannot take all the responsibility, or the country cannot take all the responsibilities by itself. But we need to have, as I said, also the cooperation and the support from the international agencies, plus the developed countries who are main responsible for the occurrence of this phenomenon.
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Ahmed Adli, for joining Nile TV International and talking live to Panorama News.
And President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi continued his activities in New York ahead of his participation in the UN General Assembly meetings. During his participation in a dinner banquet that was held by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in his honor, the president asserted that Egypt will continue with the comprehensive reform path to realize sustainable development and improve the living standards of citizens. More details in this report. The president held a number of meetings on the sidelines of his participation in the 74th session of the UN General Assembly in New York. During his participation in a dinner banquet that was held by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in his honor, the president stressed his keenness on being directly connected to the American business community to boost the direct and open dialogue regarding the chances and challenges of the joint action between the two sides, as well as addressing the problems that face investors and work to solve them. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Bassem Radi said that President el-Sisi expressed his appreciation to the role of the Chamber and the Egyptian-American Business Council in supporting the economic and trade ties between Egypt and the United States. President el-Sisi hailed the strategic Egyptian-American ties and expressed keenness on boosting them. The head of state also stressed that the economic reform program was prepared in accordance with Egypt's national requirements. He highlighted that the program's positive results were achieved due to the strong will and determination of the Egyptian people. President el-Sisi asserted that Egypt will continue with the comprehensive reform path to realize sustainable development and improve the living standards of citizens. For their part, the representatives of the major American companies hailed the recent measures taken by the Egyptian government to improve conditions for investment in Egypt and the ongoing implementation of mega national projects.
On the sidelines of the 74th session of the UN General Assembly meetings, His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and President of Sierra Leone. Let's watch.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi met with President of Sierra Leone, Julius Maada Bio, in New York on the sidelines of the 74th round of the UN General Assembly meetings. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Bassem Radi said that the president praised the strong relations between Egypt and Sierra Leone. Radi added that President el-Sisi asserted Egypt's keenness on boosting bilateral cooperation in all fields, including trade, exchange and investment, technical support, as well as military and security coordination to support the country's development efforts. He said the security of West Africa is of direct impact on the Egyptian national security. The two leaders also discussed the latest developments regarding the UN Security Council reforms in light of President Julius Maada Bio's role as the coordinator of the 10-member African Committee assigned with reforming and enlarging African representation in the Council. Radi noted that the meeting also touched on the latest developments of a number of African files in light of Egypt's chairmanship of the African Union and cooperation among African states within the framework of the resolutions of the Egyptian Agency for Partnership for Development in Africa. Also on the sidelines of the 74th session of the UN General Assembly meetings, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi met with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas at his residence in New York. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Bassam Radi said that the meeting focused on following up with the recent developments of the Palestinian cause. Radi added that during the meeting, President el-Sisi stressed that Egypt would continue with efforts to have the Palestinian people regain their rights and establish their independent state through a just and comprehensive solution. For his part, Abbas expressed his appreciation to Egypt's efforts and its historic stances in supporting the Palestinian cause, highlighting the deeply rooted brotherly ties between the people of the two countries.
Welcome back. We resume Panorama News. On the sidelines of the UN General Assembly meetings, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi held a summit meeting with Jordanian King Abdullah II and the Iraqi president. In the meeting, the three Arab leaders had reviewed the outcome of the latest Arab summit, developments in the Middle East, and means of achieving a unified Arab stance towards the crises in the region, atop of which is the Palestinian cause. The leaders also agreed to continue consultations as well as coordination to boost Arab national security.
On the sidelines of the UNGA meetings, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi met with Shul Daniel, the General Director of the UN World and Food Organization. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Bassam Radi said that the President praised the unique cooperation between Egypt and the organization in the field of food safety and security and agricultural development. Radi added that the President highlighted Egypt's keenness to further boost cooperation to achieve agricultural development, as agriculture is a high priority and as it's an important pillar of achieving sustainable development.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said that the United States wanted to give diplomacy every opportunity to succeed in the wake of the attacks that set aflame the two Saudi Arabia's oil fields. He said that if they are unsuccessful in that and Iran continues to strike out in this way, he's confident that President Trump will make the decisions necessary to achieve their objectives. Tensions escalated in the wake of the devastating September 14th attacks on Saudi oil installations that Washington and Riyadh have blamed on Tehran. The story.
The United States said it will make its case against Iran at the United Nations this week, insisting it wants to give diplomacy every opportunity to succeed in the wake of a devastating attack on a vital Saudi oil complex. Setting the stage of President Donald Trump's address to the annual UN General Assembly on Tuesday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo put aside threats of U.S. military retaliation against Iran for the attack. The United States has accused Tehran of carrying out the sneak air attacks that set aflame Saudi Arabia's Abqaiq plant and the Quraysh oil field September 14, knocking out half the kingdom's oil production. Pompeo called it one of the largest attacks on the global energy supply in history. But despite initial warnings by Trump that U.S. forces were locked and loaded, the U.S. president quickly softened his rhetoric, brushing off Republican hoax who warned that the absence of a forceful response would be read as weakness in Tehran. Trump has so far ordered step-down sanctions against Iran and a relatively modest deployment of U.S. troops to the Gulf, primarily focused on defensive missions like air and missile defense. On Sunday, before leaving the White House on a trip to Texas, Trump once again left open the possibility of an unscheduled meeting on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. The U.S. diplomatic offensive comes as Iran has sharpened its tone with a warning from a Revolutionary Guard Corps commander that Iran is ready for any type of scenario.
Well, that's all for the political stories. A roundup of the world of economy and business coming up next.